So welcome everyone to the next version of Thriving Through the Decade of Disruption. And I know I say this every time, but I really am truly excited today to be talking to Veronica and Sean about their journey. These guys have absolutely are absolutely crushing it with a whole new business, a whole new product range, and it is tremendously encouraging and exciting to see what they've been able to achieve. So again, the whole point of the Thriving Through the Decade of Disruption series is to demonstrate how do you actually get success with something new, with a new idea or a new innovation. And it's interestingly, it's a lot harder than what people think. You know, some people see someone who's been successful and it happened overnight and they think, wow, I wish, maybe I could do that. And it's not necessarily that easy. And I think what you'll hear from listening to Veronica and Sean, that it has actually happened really fast, but it's actually been challenging. There's been lots of challenges. And that's what we really want to unpack today is some of those challenges. But ultimately, I guess the essence of what this series is about is trying to work out this whole idea around finding product market fit, making sure you solve the right problem with the right solution. And I guess in some senses why I've asked Veronica and Phil to come along, Veronica and Sean to come along, is because I think they nailed it. They had that product market fit. And in some senses, when we're thinking about around business model success, the first part is product market fit. If you don't have that, then you just can't keep going. But once you get product market fit, then the next part of that is equally as difficult, which is business model fit. How do you get the right business model? And you can have the right product, the right market, but if you get the wrong business model, then you can screw up for a whole heap of other reasons. So Veronica and Sean, some people probably aren't that familiar with the business, but so tell us a little bit about where you're at now, and then we'll reverse engineer back out of that and work out how do we get here. So where are you, and what's the stage of your business? Who's your business, and what's your product range? Just give us a starting with that.
We're two ex-Melburnians who are now living in West Hollywood, California, and have become unintentional plant-based cheese moguls. So we make plant-based cheese out of fermented cauliflower and hemp seed. And when we first created these recipes, I guess we didn't realize quite what a market opportunity that was until we really went down the rabbit hole. So here we are 1 year later.
Yeah, cool. Now, guys, I first came across you guys when you were part of the Mars Food Australia Food Accelerator. And I was on the advisory board there, and I remember you pitching along with a number of other vegan cheese companies, and I think they had something like 260 applications, and I think we heard pitches from 30, 40 companies. Tell us a little bit about the genesis of how you got to that point. So before you actually pitched at the Mars Food Accelerator, where did this product and idea come from?
Yeah, so originally my background is a chef. I've been a chef for 20 years. And we had our own restaurant in Melbourne called Lume for the last 5 years. And I was kind of dabbling around with a plant-based menu there because we're having more and more customers come in, ask me for a plant-based menu. And the cheeses just kind of evolved out of that menu. And I started kind of playing around with them at home a bit more and fermenting. I had stuff all over our refrigerator.
Tricking me into thinking that I was eating real cheese. I was just eating it out of the fridge, not even questioning it.
And it's kind of evolved from there. So like the last 6 months that we had our restaurant, we were kind of thinking about opening another one in LA. And, we're going through the pitching process and talking to investors, and everyone was much more interested in the plant-based cheese business, which we kind of set up as like a little bit of a side hustle to the restaurant, because restaurants are not hugely profitable, especially not now. And
it was literally something I included in the pitch deck as just a side revenue channel, because restaurants are traditionally not that sustainable in terms of profitability. Yeah. But every single investor that we spoke to just wanted to know more about the cheese recipes. And it wasn't until one of them offered us $2 million straight off the bat just to buy the recipe from us that I called Sean, who was in LA pitching at the time, and told him to get back home ASAP because we'd just got into the Mars Seeds of Change Accelerator. And I'm like, don't sign anything yet. Let's just do this accelerator first and learn as much as we can from some mentors who have done this stuff before. But just let's hold off before we make any rash decisions. And I'm very glad we did that.
Yeah. So you'd made some cheeses. You're a chef. You'd made some cheeses for your own restaurant. When did you start, apart from that, hearing from investors, when did you start getting an idea that people liked this product and that you thought it was more than just a cool menu item in a recipe?
I think, like going through the process, everyone keeps talking about market testing, and I think, there's no better case of that than having a restaurant where you're serving 50 people every night. So I was serving a very early version of the cheese in the restaurant to 50 people every night, and not telling anyone that it was vegan.
Not even me.
I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell the staff. It was just kind of like, oh, something that Chef Sean's been working on. So that's where it started. And then I think you came in one night and sat at the bar, and I served it to you, and I kind of finally told you what it was all about.
And I asked what was in it, and I think that Sean didn't quite realize what he'd done. I'm like, holy fuck, you don't realize what you've done here. So you're telling me this doesn't have any nuts in it, no soy, no gluten, no, like hardly any fat in it. And I, on the other hand, just because I had a marketing agency at the time that specialized in natural food and beverage, I knew what the opportunity in that market was. So over the next couple of months, I convinced Sean to pretty much give up his entire career and join me and build Grounded Foods.
Yeah, cool. So tell us a little bit about that experience of pitching, into the accelerator, and when was it that you really started to understand that this thing was actually a lot bigger than what you thought it was?
I think, just to go back, like one thing that really differentiates us as a team, I think, and one of the reasons why we have been able to move so quickly with this is because we found a way to marry our skills together. Like, we're a husband and wife team. We spend all day together anyway. We talk about ideas all day, so that's already in our favor. But in leaving the restaurant industry, we were very intentional in wanting to create a business that had some longevity to it, and something that not only we'd enjoy waking up to every day and not feel like we were kind of going to work, but we wanted to create a business where we could work together and not have it feel like a chore. But also something where we'd be tapping into the skills that we were good at. And just because, obviously Sean's got amazing skills as a fine dining chef, but it doesn't end there. Like, that's essentially incredible R&D ability. His whole career has been about creating food that's not what it seems, and being able to tap into that multi-sensory aspect of like engaging all of the senses and creating these extraordinary dining experiences. And that doesn't have to be exclusive to a restaurant. Like, you could do that in so many other ways. And at the other end of the equation, I'm a behavioral economist. Like, I've spent my entire career watching the market and predicting trends and like trying to help other businesses in knowing how to like address gaps and what to do next. I've spent a heap of time making other people money, but we thought this time around, what if we merge those two skill sets together, and find a way that we can build a company that taps into that. And at the time, we had all different ideas. We were thinking about obviously another restaurant concept, but then some of Sean's other recipes included plant-based seafood and all sorts of things. But it didn't take long to realize, doing a bit of research into the market, that plant-based cheese was probably going to be the quickest growing opportunity, and one that we could address immediately with something that was wildly different from what anyone else had ever done before.
Yeah.
So to answer your question earlier, how did we go with pitching? Well, that was the next challenge, because just because you have a great idea, there's a whole nother language to articulating that in a way that gets investors really excited. And I guess it demonstrates how do I put it? Even though we knew there was a market, like, you've got to learn the language to explain it to people so that they just get it immediately and learn the right keywords, and understand what they want, so that you're showing like, this is how we can help you. This is how we can solve a problem for you. This is how we can make you more money. And it wasn't until we learnt that, and a lot of that came through the Mars Seeds of Change Accelerator, that we really clicked and worked out the direction that we were going to head in.
Yeah. And one thing I remember when we were in that experience, I think the first couple of times we were bouncing off ideas of each other. I know, and Veronica, you touched on this, is that in some ways you were thinking that this is a platform of making, non-meat-based, non-animal-based products using plant-based products. And there was a thought that maybe this was just like it was almost like a process that you could commercialize. And like you say, you could make fish products, you could make, I know we were talking at one stage as you had a US company that was interested in in these products for their pizzas, you know, for actually creating, say, a plant-based mozzarella or something like that, and you had some ideas around that, you had some prototypes, and you're toying with the idea of, you know, do we license it to them, you know, or do we sell it to them? And I know you had that opportunity. And so, you know, I know we talked about that, and I guess it would have been very attractive because you could have made a fair bit of money on that, but at some point you made that decision to stick with a product and actually become a product company, not a technology company. So talk to us about that decision point when you actually thought, okay, we could go one or two ways, and both of which could have been quite successful, but you made that call to say, actually, let's just keep it to ourselves and let's actually reduce it to a product and let's go into the product business. How did you come to make that decision? I
think it was through a lot of guidance from mentors as well. But essentially it's because, as I explained before, our skill sets are 50% in R&D, but also 50% in marketing and branding. So we figured in order to create a business that had the most, I guess, potential at being long lasting, we should market this as more of a lifestyle brand, not so much a food brand, because obviously people can, over time, they'll probably copy us and come up with similar recipes and reverse engineer it, but it doesn't matter because we're the ones with the brand that's known for continually innovating, and we will never stop. And that's the core of who we are. We're just always looking at what's next. And even though we're about to launch this range of products, like we're already working on the next launch behind the scenes. And that's where I think we have a really unique advantage.
Yeah. And I know that that at some levels you're going through this process, you're in an accelerator and you're just starting to discover what you might have. You know, you got the tiger by the tail to a degree. And I guess what I think the mentors are in the program saw, and I certainly saw that when I understood, you know, really for the first time, the significance of having, you know, basically cauliflower and hemp seed as your stock ingredient. I mean, that unlocks enormous value because every other vegan cheese is largely cashew based or maybe almond based. So you've got nut issues, you've got cost issues, you've got sustainability issues. And it seemed as though there is a limit to how much cashew based cheese you can make because there's a limit to how many cashews there are. But cauliflower is this product. And just talk to us a little bit about that idea, because I've seen in some of your stuff around using maybe waste grade or second grade sort of ingredients, because that for me is just an additional level of reducing the cost for a product that is really expensive to actually sell. Talk to us about how you discovered that opportunity of actually reducing those costs even further by using second grade sort of ingredients.
And it wasn't even the first iteration of the recipe, was it, Sean?
No, I think it kind of goes back to, it comes back to being a chef. You know, when you're running a restaurant, you're very, very conscious of using everything. And
zero waste.
Zero waste, like nose to tail, wherever you want to put it. So, you know, when you're scaling into a manufacturing role, that's even more important because you're talking about, you know, huge numbers then. So I was looking around for something that was not only sustainable, but nutrient dense and obviously delicious, you know, something with a similar flavor profile that could, you know, I could help replicate that kind of cheesy umami sort of flavor. So cauliflower is kind of like a natural fit, you know. It's
obvious to him, not obvious to anyone else in the world.
But I mean, food wastage, you know, in Australia is a huge problem, and it's, you know, it's tenfold here in the US. You know, there's so much of our food that's grown every year just goes straight in the bin, you know, or it just gets dumped back into the ground as you know, fertilizer. So, you know, we're essentially making a product from a waste product. You know, we're value adding onto the supply chain. We're not kind of using something that is already a precious resource.
So when you position that against the myriad of other companies out at the moment that base their products usually out of nuts like cashews, it's really, really difficult for them to compete with a company that's creating their products out of wasted cauliflower leaves that would normally go in the bin.
Yeah.
And then another big thing is obviously the cost. So like cashews are hugely expensive, even when you're buying in bulk, whereas, you know, cauliflower's literally dirt cheap. It gets even cheaper when you're using, you know, the ugly cauliflower, the waste.
Imperfect vegetables.
Imperfect. So our I guess big picture scheme is to actually compete with big dairy and be price competitive with them, not with other vegan companies, but with big dairy, you know, they've got a head start because they get subsidized by the government.
And they've got the economies of scale.
Yeah.
But it just, when we looked at it, it would never be possible to compete with that if you're using nuts as a core ingredient. So we had to find another way, something that obviously no one had been able to do this before and compete at that level. So we had to throw away the rule book of how it had been done before and just start again in a completely different fashion.
Yeah.
There is a couple of companies that are doing, you know, mass scale vegan cheese that's not made from nuts, but there's no nutrients to it. It's literally just coconut oil, starch, you know, squished together. So there's nothing healthy or nutritious about it. Whereas, you know, we're trying to make something on scale at a competitive price that's still good for you.
Yeah. And what I love about this is that because you're thinking about, and particularly what you've just said there, you're not focused on vegan cheese market and you know, I reflect on a discussion I had with Phil Moore from Main Sequence Ventures. They funded the V2 Food burger, you know, with Hungry Jack's. And, you know, they said, look, we don't see ourselves as a vegan burger. We're just a burger that's just not made from cows, you know? Yeah. And in some senses, and he said, that's this great comment, he says, you know, the burger market is $1 trillion market. And there's room for everyone. And we've got an extra 2 billion people that want to eat burgers. We do not have enough planet to grow the cows. You know, so they're not trying to compete. They don't see the animal industry as the enemy. They just see that they are another product in this big market. And if they can be cost competitive and if they can be, you know, quality competitive in terms of the flavor and the sensory, then they don't particularly care whether Beyond Meat or Impossible are out there. There's enough room for probably another half a dozen more. And so I think what I love about what you've done is you've had this big picture idea. You're not just trying to keep this very small pie. You're trying to grab a small piece of a ridiculously large pie. And I think the competitive advantage you've found, which is the cost of ingredients, that's the unlock, you know, and not only the only unlock, but the unlock around the environmental responsibility of having something that's, you know, otherwise a waste product. And then being nut and allergy free, you get all these consumer benefits. So, yeah. So kudos to you guys. So, but I guess I want to fast forward a little bit because one of the things I talk about in entrepreneurship is that the first part of it is finding a problem and then finding a solution. So you had the problem, you had the solution together, but at some point, you know, there's a chance element to it. There's a luck element to this, of the right place at the right time. So talk to us about, you know, any of those early incidences, because I know you're in Australia, we're doing this accelerator, you're talking to lots of people, and then all of a sudden you're in New York. How did that happen?
It seems like we do things really spontaneously and quickly, but we spend a lot of time on strategy at home in our dungeon. You can imagine, like, you know, we're workaholics. We're just serial entrepreneurs. We love creating businesses. So there was never another option for us. Like, we have never wanted to settle down, have a family or anything like that. We love doing this. So it kind of makes sense that we move so quickly because it's 100% of our focus. But how did we get to New York? It was because I was at a conference called Global Table back in Melbourne. And I ran into a venture capitalist who I was told specialized in plant-based proteins, and he had a fund. And the Mars Accelerator had taught me how to do like a 5-minute pitch. So I went up to him and started reciting my 5-minute pitch, thinking that he might, you know, give us some advice on where to go next, or, you know, might connect us with someone from the US. But better than that, he actually offered us $200,000 in investment, and pretty much a week later, we were in the US, in New York, and yeah, took it from there. As I said, we move fast.
And that's amazing that you're able to and I think that there's the elements of that is one, you've always got to be ready, you know, and again, as Oprah says, and many people say, you know, luck is when preparation meets opportunity, you know. And so you've done all the hard work, and then you've actually created the opportunity because you're out there, you're pitching, you're talking to lots of people, and you just happen to come across the right place, the right person, the right place, the right time, and then you're able to respond to that really quickly. You're able to react. So yeah. So you landed in the US a week or two later. You've got a couple of $100,000 in the bank, and then what happened?
I mean, we worked out very quickly as soon as we got to the US that we didn't have, we only had ESTA visas. So that's like an Australian tourist visa. It didn't mean that we could actually sell any products there or really give anyone samples of our products or do anything. And
you actually don't like to do anything business related at all.
Nothing at all.
It's like the worst visa to go over there.
Yeah. But as we found, US immigration is something that you do not want to test or mess with. So we were very, very careful and pretty much operated in stealth mode for the next 6 months. So we were very careful just to be behind the scenes, just set up everything else that we could legally do around establishing a company, which was a lot. So things like, even just getting our patents down, getting the IP in place, finding a co-packer, which was a feat in itself, testing the market, testing new recipes, pretty much everything else you can imagine around that, we worked on for 6 months to get us ready to the point where after 6 months, we got our visas, we could launch it, straight away. We started talking to potential buyers and retailers and restaurants. And I pretty much had 2 weeks to start selling the hell out of this product before COVID hit and the entire world collapsed. And then we were back at square one again in a foreign country, having spent our entire life savings getting there, and now the world's on pause. So that was an interesting moment. And I think that's what breeds innovation even further, because you've got no choice at that point but to respond and survive and just do whatever you can to stay afloat and get an edge on the competition to keep moving.
Yeah. Can you tell us about, because that all happened so quickly, because we're talking about basically it's a year from when you first started pitching to now, which is ridiculously fast. Can you tell, and sometimes when things are moving that fast, which is great. I mean, we talk about product market fit, you can tell when you got product market fit because the dogs are eating the dog food. You just can't keep up. Everyone just loves it. You just can't get enough. So you obviously had product market fit. But when you're moving very fast, you can make mistakes. What's the one or two things that you think things that was probably a mistake, or that was something we did that we perhaps might regret, or maybe things would have been different if we hadn't done that? Any of those sort of lessons for any of the young players?
I can think of, I guess, the style of products that we were going to launch. I wouldn't say that this was a mistake because we never went through with anything. And we have had the benefit of being through 2 accelerator programs now. So we've had so much time to think and so much time to talk about it and strategize that we've been pretty good so far in taking the right steps. But a big pivot for us was that some of our initial recipes were based on these extraordinary specialty style cheeses like Camembert and Gruyere, and just amazing stuff that Sean had created. But it didn't take us long to work out that when you're talking to venture capitalists, they like to see volume of sales and they don't like the word specialty or artisan or any of the above. So we had to think really quickly about, forget your love for the products. That is irrelevant. How much can we realistically sell of this? How many Camemberts could we realistically sell versus a burger slice or a pizza, a pizza cheese or something like that? And you just have to, I guess you can't be too precious about it. You can't let your love of a product get in the way if there's, every signal in the market is saying yeah, that's cool, but this is what people are demanding. So easy pivot for us. We're ditch the Camembert. We're not going to do that for now. Focus on something else.
Yeah, I think we managed to freestyle it a bit. We're originally really pinning the business on doing that Camembert and an aged cheese or Gruyere, and then the further we got down the line, and looking at scaling and looking at the costs, it was gonna cost us $1 million US to make the Camembert.
Yeah.
Because you're setting up a facility that only does that, because of the cultures and the bacteria needs to be contained, and then you're talking about filtration systems and all that sort of thing. So it's crazy expensive because it's a plant-based cheese. There's hundreds of companies that do dairy ones, and they've got their huge facilities set up, and they supply all the major players. But we didn't want to make a plant-based Camembert in a dairy facility because then you have to put it on the label. So
I think it's a really important point, just not to be precious about that stuff. I think that's where a lot of other entrepreneurs sometimes fall down, because it's like, it's your baby, you know, your business, you spend so much time every day being absorbed in it, that I think some people, when they're seeing those signals that are saying like, hey, this is maybe not the right direction to go down, they still do it because they love it so much, and they find it very difficult to just let go and pivot straight away. And one thing I guess we've got in our favour is that we're not sentimental about stuff. So we'll make that decision very quickly to ditch an idea and burn it and move in the other direction if the market tells us that.
I think it's being like crystal clear and absolutely brutal about setting rules for yourself, and being like very, very clear with everyone that's in the business at that early stage is, you know, what is our company? Why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Because if we were dead set on doing that camembert, we could sell to, you know, LA and actually make like a nice little cottage business and be quite comfortable and, you know, have a nice apartment and all that sort of thing. But if we want to sell to, you know, the entire mainland US, that's a huge demographic, you know, hundreds of millions of people from all different kind of walks of life. And
just got to think more broadly.
Yeah, if you're going to take that VC money, you have to, you know, I'm not saying you have to compromise, but you have to be very crystal clear about what the rules are for the business.
Yeah. And I think one unique perspective that we've got on things, which I think resonated with VCs, is that, and it's like V2, I think, with the, and Beyond and Impossible and these burger companies, that we never set out to call this a vegan business. Like, you won't see the word vegan on our labeling. Technically the product is vegan, but that's not where I saw a gap in the market. The white space that I saw was for a plant-based product that actually appealed to mainstream consumers. So I think the problem is solved for vegan consumers. There's plenty of vegan cheeses out there, but that's less than 1% of the market. And they can have that. I want to take the other 99%, or, you know, a part of that, right?
A chunk of it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so that came down to just awareness of what people actually want, and an awareness of the consumer psychology behind it. Like, a lot of people, they see a product that's labeled as vegan, and immediately that triggers the idea that it's lacking in something, that it tastes worse, that it's elitist, it's not for them. And we want to avoid that at all costs. We want to make something that's really approachable, that people in a non-threatening way can try for the first time, and they don't have to give up dairy. They can eat it side by side with dairy if they want on a cheese platter. It doesn't matter. Eat it however you want, some of the time.
Yeah, I love it. And what I love about that little conversation is that, you know, when we're talking to entrepreneurs, and you said it exactly right, Veronica, a lot of entrepreneurs fail because they fall in love with their product, and, you know, sometimes their baby is ugly. You know, the product is just the wrong product, you know? Whereas what you're talking about is falling in love with your customer, falling in love with the problem. Yeah. And then if you're passionate about the customer, if you're passionate about the problem, then you do whatever. The solution can be fluid. And you were fortunate enough to have a platform where you could create various iterations of that solution, and staying focused on delivering a solution for a range of customers that have problems. And I think that's just, it's 101 of what separates successful entrepreneurs from people who just never got there, because they just were locked in. And so I'm loving that sort of openness. And I talk about keeping your idea in an open hand, not in a closed fist. There's a lot of people that just lock in, and their fingernails are, you know, they've got the white knuckles because they're holding on for dear life, because they're sure that they're going to make this work. And I'm sure you guys have done that, but you've done that around the business and around the why, not around the what. And that's what I think is really impressive about your story.
Yeah, you're right. I think it comes down to having that experience from the hospitality industry as well, because we didn't create these products because we're vegan. We're not vegan. We didn't create it because we have a huge passion for vegan cheese. We created it initially because we were trying to solve a problem for ourselves. Sean had more and more vegan customers coming into the restaurant asking for plant-based alternatives. Most of them would have other requests, like they'd want it gluten-free, or, you know, no nuts, that have allergens, all sorts of requests. So he was really just trying to make something that was easy for him to prepare and foolproof for other chefs in the restaurant to prepare. Right.
And I love the fact that you sort of got the opportunity from a very small micro segment of the market, but then you saw the opportunity actually is much bigger than that, because we know that, as you say, a very small percentage of the population are vegan, but there's, a majority of the population are trying to eat less meat, are trying to eat less animal products. And so that's just such a bigger market. And I think the fact that you saw that and then you worked out, well, what does the solution have to look like to be able to satisfy that market, which unlocks this enormous value over and above, and then going into cauliflower, secondary cauliflower and hemp seed, it means you can compete with the price of milk. And therefore you're actually cost competitive, which is just awesome. Tell me a little bit about, and just for those of you that are watching, if you've got any questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A section down below. So if you do have a burning question, just drop it into the Q&A. But I'm interested in talking about business models, because your product is great. And I'm a little bit sad that you're moving away from the Camembert, because it is just an astounding product. It is
divine.
It is remarkable. I was so impressed. But I love the fact that you pivoted to do something that actually makes more sense, and that is really heartening. And I'm sure you'll come back to the Camembert, because you just have to, because people are going to pay.
Yeah, we'll do it in the future. I think once we make our millions, hopefully.
Yep.
We'll be able to afford to do it then.
It really came to the cheeses that we chose to launch with were really just because of practicality, because we thought we've been talking about this concept for so long. The demand is there. This is the time. We actually just have to launch already and work out the complexities later. So we just focused on the products that were the fastest, the least complex, and the lowest cost to get it straight out the door.
And that's just clever. So well done to you guys. I think you've actually got the right things right, and you've held it in an open hand, which is great. What I love about, when I talk about alternative business strategies and in food, I love the contrast between, Beyond Meat and Impossible both spent about $500 million building this burger that tasted like meat but didn't have any meat in it. I think one of them, I can't remember which one, generated $50 million worth of sales in their first year. And then the cauliflower guys who did the cauliflower pizza base, they generated $45 million in the first year, and they'd spent next to nothing, And so again, if you get the right product market fit, then that can pull you through. But what I'm interested in is a bit more about the business model, because you've got the product that's given. The customers want it. They're eating your arms off to try and get it. But you would have had an opportunity, I guess, to build a really big factory. You could have raised $50 million, built a massive factory and gone in. What have you actually done in terms of trying to work out how do you actually get there fast? Because it would have taken a long time to build a big factory and make, a million tons worth of cheese. How did you go about actually going from what you knew when you had product market fit to working out how do we get this product to market as soon as possible?
We very quickly worked out that we couldn't do it in Australia. It just wasn't practical. And I think that's largely because just the size of the market. Australia is that compared to the US. But in that, it meant that we couldn't even get a test kitchen in Australia where we could, where Sean could work on these recipes. And that was a signal that maybe this isn't the right place to be. So if we couldn't even get a test kitchen, then I wouldn't like our luck of even finding a co-packer that could handle a startup that they'd never heard of, using a unique process that had never been done before in small quantities, for those initial orders. So it just made complete sense to come over here, where I think the market was a little bit more advanced and there was probably more VC money around this space, a bit more resources in terms of just getting us off the ground, and we could solve those problems very, very easily over here. So that was part of it. Our initial distribution strategy, just coming from the hospitality industry, was to start with restaurants at the time, and this is in a pre-COVID world, just because that's the people we knew. It was really easy for us, really low cost of customer acquisition, because we could rely on Sean's reputation and people already knew us. So back in, I guess, early March, after having 2 weeks of giving out samples of these products, we had about 150 restaurants that were lined up to buy them around New York. And then obviously the entire industry crashed overnight when the lockdowns happened. And we had to make a really, really quick decision over our business model straight away. We can't rely as a startup on selling products to restaurants at all at this point, because we have no idea what will happen with that industry. It doesn't take much, as restaurants operate on such such thin margins anyway, to collapse an entire industry. We've got to think about completely pivoting. And so we thought, well, retail, we can go down that route instead. But then obviously with COVID, retailers were so focused on securing their own supply chains just with existing products and making sure they didn't run out of toilet paper, that they weren't taking new products, they weren't taking on any new meetings for that matter with the startup company. So that was out of the picture as well. And that left us with direct to consumer. And I think what better time than to try out launching a direct to consumer model than during COVID, when everyone is locked down, literally sitting in front of their screens, desperate for food because they can't buy it in the supermarkets. So we figured, let's have a crack at it. It's a bit of an ask considering that we're in the US. No one's ever tried these products before. No one knows who we are. We've got no brand presence here. And we're asking people to prepay for something, 2 months or 3 months before it's actually going to ship to them. But hey, we didn't have a lot to lose. And we figured that COVID's probably a pretty forgiving time to test out something like that anyway, because you can just blame COVID if things go awry. So we put up an online Shopify account. We figured we'll just make these products from a dark kitchen down the road, a closed restaurant, or whatever we have to do to work it out, and do it by hand. And anyway, we launched an online shop, didn't do any marketing around it whatsoever, just said on Instagram, hey, you can buy it now. Pre-sales are open. And we made $5,000 US in the first 48 hours, which in the scheme of things, that's not a huge amount of money, but when you consider all of those factors, combined, where no one knows what this is, or who we are, and they're not even going to receive it straight away, then that's significant. And we saw that as a pretty excellent signal of just how much heat was in this market right at this stage. And we're going to continue with the direct-to-consumer strategy as we go forward because, well, one, COVID still exists. But I also think that even when retailers start opening up again, the world is not going to look the same. And so many consumers are now used to and just familiar with online shopping now that a chunk of them are never going to go back. So it just made a lot of sense for us to continue with that. It's one channel that we've got complete control over. And in the meantime, behind the scenes, we can start thinking about a broader retail launch and I guess use the direct to consumer stuff as more of our soft launch.
Yeah. And that's great, I guess. And in some sense, that's what we did with Perky when we first did the first Perky product. We hand filled the bottles, put the labels on, took it to a local Pando Paleo cafe and gave it to them and said, look, can you sell it for $5 a bottle? And they did, and it became a great selling product. And we did that for 6 to 12 months, and then we raised $4 million in capital on the basis of the idea and the validated sales data. So how did you go about raising capital? So you had $200,000, you went to New York. I'm sure you spent that pretty quickly. What happened next in terms of capital raising?
As soon as we finished the Big Idea Ventures Accelerator, so we got our capital from a hybrid VC/accelerator fund in New York. They put us through a 6-month program, and on the other side of that, we popped out and decided that we were going to go skip the usual trajectory and still pre-revenue. We were just going to go straight in for a priced round and raise $2 million straight off the bat. And most people said that we were nuts. That's just us. We're pretty extreme people and we like to do the impossible. So we just went for it. Announced our seed round, and then literally an hour later, Wall Street crashed. I watched it live on the TV in our apartment and I'm like, oh, that's a bad sign. Oh, how's the timing on that? And it got really hairy. So for the next couple of months, it was pretty touch and go. We weren't sure what was going to happen. VCs just went completely quiet on us. We'd actually, prior to COVID, we'd been valued at $10 million in the whole, as you can imagine, the Silicon Valley style flurry of excitement around plant-based products. And we just thought, cool, if someone wants to value us at that, we're not going to argue. But we learned very quickly that there's a lot more complexity to that kind of extraordinarily high valuation, and it can actually be a deterrent to getting other investors on board. But I think we we brought it down a little bit to something a bit more reasonable. So we ended up with an $8 million post money valuation, and still managed to close our round mid-COVID. Not only close it, but ended up oversubscribed by the end of it. We got 4 term sheets in 1 week at one point, which was crazy. Like, to go from freaking out whether you're still going to exist 1 week to suddenly the floodgates open, and as with venture capital, as soon as one investor's interested, then they all hop on like vultures, and it just goes bananas, which is a beautiful place to be.
And that's basically how it happened. Like, as soon as we had one person interested, and they just started talking, because everyone knows everyone else.
Yeah.
And behind the scenes, you know, I'm making like hundreds and hundreds of samples. We spent an absolute fortune on FedEx, sending them all over the country, all over the world, actually.
Just fingers crossed that people would actually like the products. Still not sure.
Yeah.
And then, end result was it kind of all happened in 1 week, and our biggest problem suddenly came, not do we survive as a company, but like, which term sheet do we pick, and how do we now learn law so that we can assess what these terms are and start to break them down a bit and understand it.
Yeah. So what's the plan? So you raised a bit of money. Are you, in terms of this first round of manufacturing, have you bought a factory? Are you just hiring some facilities? Are you outsourcing that? How's that going to happen?
So we've got a co-manufacturer that's it's about an hour away from where we are now. We're doing a capital lease agreement with them. So we're buying about $400,000 worth of equipment and putting it into their facility. So they'll be still making the products for us, and then we get a reduced tolling fee as they kind of pay back that equipment. So it was a good fit for us.
It was more of a partnership, not a traditional co-packing arrangement where, you know, it's a business transaction. You're handing over your product blindly and getting someone else to do it. We really wanted a closer relationship with our co-man, a place where we can literally have Sean there every day watching over things, maintaining quality, and I guess a more long-term relationship with them.
Without having to put in all that capex up front, you know, and you said it yourself before, it would have taken us years to get a facility off the ground that was kind of, you know, anywhere close to scale. So that's how we managed to do it quite quickly. And because our process is quite unique, we're doing fermentation. You know, you talk to most co-manufacturers about fermentation, and they run away screaming. So it's just too complicated for them. Everyone wants a turnkey solution. So it took us a little while to find someone that was interested in working with us. But when we did, it's been a great relationship. And as Veronica said, it's actually been you know, more like a partnership. They've been super helpful. Obviously, being in a new country, everything's kind of same but different. You know, I think we've spent half our time here actually just learning, you know, kind of basic stuff, which is basic to everyone else, but not when you first move to a country. You know, tax law, payroll tax, you know, rules, regulations, everything's similar but different.
Yeah. And what I love about that, and I remember I did a session on business model canvas, and one of the things that I think, you know, we talk about in the business model, you got the right hand side of the business model canvas talks about desirability. The left hand side is about feasibility, which is where you identify partners, and then the bottom is viability. And clearly you had desirability. What I'm really liking about this is that this feasibility, which is, you know, do I build, do I borrow, do I partner? And so finding partners is really critical, because it means you can get to market faster, and it means you need to raise less money, which means you've got less risk. And that then helps your viability down the bottom, because you've got really good cost of goods. You've got, you know, low levels of capex. You've got a partner who's got expertise. And again, that's just such a great strategy in terms of reducing the reason why a lot of organizations fail even after product market fit, because they either run out of money, or they don't have the skills, or they don't have the network. So well done on getting the 3 levels of the business model canvas all nailed. I'm just going to quickly share an advertisement from our sponsors, which is the University of Queensland Business School. So again, for those of you that are watching, that are interested in some of these tools and techniques that we talk about in the business school, I was lucky enough to be part of the accelerator, where I was able to engage with Veronica and Sean. But if you're thinking about from an MBA point of view, you know, we've seen a significant increase in people interested in studying an MBA, because there's been such disruption in so many sectors. So a lot of people are thinking about, well, how do I develop these skills so that I've got a chance of actually pivoting myself or actually doing something new? So So we've got a couple of webinars coming up on the 8th of October and the 10th of November. So for those of you that are watching, if you're interested in MBA, think about coming along to one of these live webinars and a Q&A session. The other one is we're also running a range of executive education short courses. So these are courses around innovation, around optimizing influence and negotiation. And we're doing some of these both online and some face-to-face. Even some of them are starting next week. So if you're interested in, again, skilling up on some new skills or being able to work out how do you modify or change your strategy in the middle of what is a massive global once in a 100-year pivot opportunity or disruption opportunity, then please feel free to look at the business.uq.edu.au website and see some of those courses. So, look, guys, I'm so thrilled that you've done that well, and that you've taken this idea and you turn it into an innovation. You know, we talk about the way to do that is you have an idea, you've got to make it real, but then you've got to work out how to unlock value. And you made it real, but then what you've done is you've actually worked out how to unlock value with that idea, and you've just crushed it. And I'm just so proud of you. I'm impressed that you're doing it, and so pleased for you that things are going. And I wish you all the very best. So congratulations, and wish you Godspeed in terms of your next generation, and long live the cauliflower and hemp seed cheeses. So well done, guys. I look forward to catching up with you when you come back to Oz. And I am very keen to get my laughing gear around some of this product as soon as we possibly can manage it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Cameron.
Thanks, guys. All the best. And if for those of you that are watching, we've got a short poll which Leah's going to put up, and if you can answer a few questions there, that would be great. And keep a lookout for Veronica and Sean and Grounded Foods, and maybe they might be coming to a store near you before too long. So thanks, Veronica and Sean. All the best, and we'll talk to you again soon.